Next finish we're going to talk about is Reflectit. And this is where I really need everyone to pay real close attention to what I'm going to tell you. Reflectit is an ultra smooth finish to mimic a metal panel appearance. So if you think in terms of white coat, you think in terms of ornamental plaster, Reflectit is the ornamental plaster of eaves. The level preparation as it relates to the steps that you normally start with, and then apply a product called Skim It to make it ultra smooth, is the secret. Everything else goes really easy from there if you get those preparation steps done. So the first step in the process, you put your foam system up, you sand it, you do the best foam job you've ever done. All your irises are nice and crisp. All your aesthetic joints are nice and crisp. Then your base coat and mesh. You base coat and mesh. You know how when you see trowel marks and you see the mesh pattern, that cannot be visible before the primer goes on. And if it is, it will never fly. It will show through every time. To spray apply Reflectit, there's specific equipment that you have to have. So we're going to start with that. The first is a Binx Pressure Pot. Carmine, if I get you to step up so I don't hit you for a second. Okay. It's dual regulated for your air as well as for your fluid. There is no other piece of equipment anywhere that's acceptable to spray this material. So it's an investment of buying one of those units. Somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 depending upon the one that you buy. It also requires a Binx 2001 or a 2100 spray gun with a 66 SS fluid and air cap. So when you take a look at these, there's SS printed right on the fluid cap. There's SD printed right on the air cap. Never take this off. I'm just showing you what it looks like on the inside. The air cap does a dual purpose of protecting the needle as well as the fluid tip. When we set it up and start running water through it, I will show you how to make sure that there is not a problem with that tip. Because if there is, do not move forward until they're replaced. Okay? When I buy a Binx gun, I buy an extra needle, an extra fluid cap, and an extra air cap and have that with me at all times. What if I have a problem? I can immediately pull those out, put a new one on, and keep right on going. It's also a good idea to have a second gun in case something happens. The pressure pot, even though that they'll want to sell you 50-foot hoses, 25-foot hoses, what you need is 12-foot air and 12-foot fluid supply. I prefer clear so that I can see the material flow. I can see when I clean it out that I've got it cleaned. Okay? So not real expensive, but just 12-foot hoses. So if it comes with 50-foot hose, have them cut them, put new ends on. All you want is 12 foot. Just imagine with that supply hose and it's 90-degree day and that's laying out on the concrete. What's it going to do? 50 foot. 50 foot of hose takes a whole 5-gallon pail just to prime the gun. All you need is 12 foot. Same way when you're working on your scaffold, you're going to move this with you versus dragging the hose everywhere. Okay? In addition to that, you want liners. They come in a box of 10, and you always use liners. Just a plastic liner, and I've already put water. I'm not going to pull it out because we already pre-primed it with water to speed the process up. And that's the minimum equipment from the Binx and the sprayer. You need a compressor. It's not the size of the tank. It's the output of CFM or SCFM. Minimum of 12, no less. If you go to any equipment supply house, they never have one. If you call ahead and see if they've got one someplace, then maybe they can relocate it, but it has to be at least 12 CFM. The fluid cap and the air cap is engineered to work with at least that amount of volume of air. Anything less will not work. So many cases when Al and I will go to, I'll give you an example of one in Pittsburgh. Al goes, don't have the equipment. I go the next time. And I get there, they have a compressor that's 6.1, won't work. It has to be at least 12 CFM. It can be more than that. So the one that we're going to use here is 15 CFM. Okay? At least 12 CFM. That's critical. Generally, what you're talking about is those dual regulated Carpenter compressors. Not a big tank, but just the output so it can keep up when you're spraying. From there, then we get into the specific DryVit materials that are needed. Base coat and mesh. Once that's on, then you have to skim the base coat again. It has to be perfect. If one step will cause a problem, this is it. If you don't get the base coat right, there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to correct it from that point. That base coat has to be paint ready. If it's not, then you can't move forward until it is. Highly recommend that you use Genesis, either a dry mix, Genesis DMS, or Genesis wet to get that nice creamy surface, and then trowel that over that surface with that trowel very, very flat. A lot of guys, you don't have to, but some of us don't have the skill set to get rid of those trowel marks. Actually take 100 grit sandpaper, not 80, not 120, and sand the base coat after it's dry. Touch up any irises, the corners, the aesthetic joints. Now, as it relates to rustification or aesthetic joints, only V grooves, not square. Only V. You still get the exact same appearance, but this is a hand-applied material. If you can imagine that square joint, how do you get to that inside corner and snap a line? You can't do it. You want a V groove. You sand the foam and then cut the V groove after the fact, so the profile depth of the joint does not change. You use the hand cut method of applying the base coat and mesh. Anybody that's done ornamental plaster knows what I'm talking about. If you're actually running a cornice mold and you push it through, use the hand cut method. If you don't, what happens? Knocks the iris off, right? So you basically got to go through, base coat, skim it. If you see any mesh pattern or color whatsoever reading through the base coat, you got to skim it again. Let it fully dry. Once it's fully dry, and you're happy with the results, that if you painted it, it would be exactly like you wanted, then you come back in and you apply a product called Skim It. Imagine taking a piece of 100 grit sandpaper, which base coat would be, and rubbing your hand across that surface. Skim It, applied like a level 5 application, will take it from that 100 grit sandpaper to like smooth, like a desktop. That particular material can only be applied a 32nd of an inch. It requires 2 coats. So all you're doing is you're not fixing flaws, you're not fixing corners. All you're doing is taking it from a sandpaper-like texture, in other words the base coat, to a very smooth surface. Then you check it. Any scratches, any marks. If it's down in the brown coat, the Skim It's not going to fix it. Now here's the key. If you see a flaw that can't be fixed at that time, you have to sand back down through the Skim It to get to the base coat, fix the base coat, let it dry, and then reapply the Skim It. If you apply the base coat over the top of the Skim It, it will blister. I will repeat, it will blister. Do not apply base coat over the top of Skim It. Okay? That point, once we've got it sanded, then we let it completely dry. Just because you sand it, think in terms of Durbond 90. You put it on and you do a patch and you sand it. Well, you still have to wait 24 hours for it to dry. It's got that chemical set, but it's not dry. Same thing. Just because you sand it doesn't mean that it's dry. So then you have to wait for it's fully dry. Then you come back and you have to spray apply a color-coordinated primer called Color Prime. Must be spray applied. Repeat, spray applied. Not rolled, not brushed, because the brush marks will read through that pearlescent coating. So what you do with the color prime, you open it, you mix it, and then we'll demonstrate when Al comes back. He's got a Zahn cup, and this would be a mandatory additional tool. This is called a number 4 Zahn cup. How many times when you've went to paint something, paint a room at home, how do you know if the viscosity is right? What if it's too thick? What if it's too loose? This is what's called a portable viscosity meter. It's a Zahn cup, number 4, and it says number 4 right on it. Okay? What you basically do is after we mix the color prime, we submerge it, and then we pull it out. And as you watch your watch, the stream will continue to run. As soon as it breaks the stream, that's when you measure it. And the material should be between 25 and 35 seconds. Okay? Number 4 Zahn cup, not a 2, not a 3. Just as an example, if you took a number 2 Zahn cup to get the same measurement, you'd be holding that for over 10 minutes. It's got to be a number 4 Zahn cup. They're about $100. The easiest way to get one is on the internet. Just order one, it'll show up at the front door. Some of the Binx manufacturer or actually distributors will have those that you can order. They'll try to give you a plastic one. You don't want the plastic one. It has a different surface tension and it won't give you the same measurements. So it's just a number 4 Zahn cup. So we actually go through, predetermine on the primer. Once we basically get it to the right viscosity, an additional item that you need are paint strainers. The sock, in other words. Just think of your car or your truck that has a pearlescent coating on it. It's the same thing. If you have dried material on the side of the pail and you get it in, and when it gets to the gun, look at that small tip. This is going to atomize it, the size of a pinhead. I'm talking about a needle. So if there's a bunch of trash in there, or off the side of the pail, or dirty water, guess what happens? It plugs up the tip. So you've got to use a sock. So even your water that you put in, put the sock over the top, pour the water through, pour the coatings through. In every case, when you're going to put it in there. Okay? So you have to have those. The other thing that I would give you as a tip, they always come with a label. The reason why that label's on there, what happens after I use it the first time? So I take it over to a bucket, put it in the bucket, and I clean it, and I pull it back out. Well, which side did I have turned out? Consistently pick one or the other. Either leave the label on the inside or the label on the outside so that you don't screw up and turn it inside out and put all the trash back in the pressure pot. So you need plenty of paint strainer socks. Okay? And then typically after I use it, then I'll just come over and just hang it on the side of the pail and just make note that I always try to leave the tag on the outside. That's just the way I do it. You can do it however you'd like. Then, I'm going to set this down on the floor for a second. At that point, we've already put water in the tank, let it run through. And so now I want to pull the liner out of the pressure pot. Get rid of the water, reinsert the liner, and then put my sock in. Now obviously the area that we prepared for this today so we could show you several different things, the primer's already on, okay? So what we're going to be doing is putting the actual Reflectit materials in the pressure pot. Everybody still with me? It's a lot to remember. Here's the easiest thing. If you do a Reflectit project, who are you going to see? You're going to coordinate through Century and get with Al so that you go through and do your own mock-up so that you know exactly the steps. If you don't understand the value, you will, of having that event. In every case, do a mock-up so that you absolutely understand what it's going to take to achieve that. Don't do it on the job site. That's not the place to learn. Make sure that the guys that are going to be working on that job site are the ones that work with Al to make sure they understand the steps. If they've got any questions, if you need to go through it again, go through it again. Make sure you understand every step. So now what we're actually going to do is Al's going to, before you mix that, Al, for a second, let me show that. Just so that, I know it's kind of difficult to see, but this is normal. I'm going to walk through for a second, and I want everybody to see how the Reflectit looks. Okay? You don't see any of the pearlescence. All right? Let me walk between you if you don't mind. It's normal for the pearlescence to settle out of the Reflectit. Okay? So everybody can see. See the separation. Now, when Al starts to mix, stand up for a second and just watch the material. Let's do it on top of that bundle of foam. And immediately you'll start to see the pearlescence come to the top. Okay? Sorry, Ron. You will never get a consistent color. It'll always have a swirl appearance. It's like that, chocolate and vanilla ice cream cone. It's a combination of that swirl.
And you don't high-speed drill it either.
Not a high-speed drill. You'll notice that Al's just using, like the old BM1, just a smaller version with a variable speed drill. That's all you need. The important part, if you've opened it for the first time, is that material will be settled to the bottom of the pail through shipment of one of these. So you need to mix it, let it sit, and then remix it. You don't have to overmix it, but just mix it. So typically, the viscosity meter that we'll demonstrate here in just a second, remember what I said, you dip it, and then you watch your watch. And it should be between 25 and 35 seconds. The product data sheet will say that you can add up to a quart of water. Generally, I've never had to add more than 8 ounces. If you think that you've got to go more than that, then I'd be asking some questions. Okay? So now when we take a look, I'm just going to set it down so that you can kind of take a look at the material. Can you see the silver color now? And that's what it should look like. Okay? So you've got to mix it. Make sure that you get that paddle all the way to the bottom and get all that material off the bottom of the pail.
What about those bubbles?
Doesn't hurt a thing. It's just mixing. Okay? So when I strain it, people will ask, well, I'm going to pour it through the strainer. It's going to strain everything, as you'll see here in just a second. Okay? Any questions about the mixing? Now, we're going to demonstrate the Zahn cup. Who's got a watch? One of your phones can actually turn the timer on. You got one, Tom or Carmine, that you can watch for me? Sure. Here's how you use it. The right way to use the Zahn cup, first thing I typically do is we'll dip it in water. Just as a reference, I'll tell you when. Now watch. Just look at water, how quickly it goes through. It's usually about 7.5 seconds. Ready? Carmine? You ready to start? Say when. Okay. So watch. So as soon as it breaks the stream, not when it empties out, but when it breaks the stream, it's usually about 7.5, 8 seconds. Okay? All right, so now, but here's the important part, because most people will think that it's got to be completely emptied out. So you do the same thing. You submerge it, and then when you're ready, say ready, and then I'll just pull it. Okay? So I'll tell you when it's about half, and then you tell me where we're at. Okay, we're about half. Okay, so the key is you go through each one, but you go through, and what will happen, people will look at it and say, well, when I just shake my hand a little bit, it gives the false impression that it's breaking the stream. So you kind of have to be kind of steady-handed. But ultimately, it's not going to run completely out. So when we checked it yesterday, the material was right around 30 seconds. Okay? And that's called a number 4 Zahn cup.
$110.
If you're going to do any painting at home, how do you tell if the material is too thick? Right here. After you use them once, that's what you'll be using going forward, just to make sure that you check your paint. Okay, so I was looking for that. I can get it. So now, what we're ready to do is take the tank. Got my sock in place. Pour the material. Then just take the sock, pull it up, and then I just take the sock because I want to reuse it, usually for the same work period, and then just rinse it out. And I'll typically, just to see if there's any trash, when you look at the inside, see the stuff on the inside of the sock? Just a little bitty thing can actually plug up that tip. So always make sure, even when you put water in, just use the sock, and I've got the tag on the outside, then I'll typically just lay it. After I rinse it good, I'll just lay it across the pail to continue to reuse it. All right. As far as your other remaining Reflectit, put your lid back on so it's not exposed to heat and the sun. Take the tank lid, set it in place, move it around so that they don't align. Then we're ready to take it over and hook it up. Now we got air. Yeah, we got air though. Just shut it off. No, just shut that off, just so it's closed. I've got air. Now what you do, let's set it up on a bucket so that they can see it. Dual regulation. This is your fluid flow, this is your air flow. Typically just shut your air completely off and then start screwing in. You can start out at about 15, and what we're going to do is, because your gauge, never trust the gauges. I've been on some, the gauge will say 2, some of them will say 35. I'm going to show you how to overcome that. All that is a reference tool. So when you start, put your spray gun on the edge of a bucket, and so just like right now, even though you can't see it, I'm going to spray a little water towards Al, but you can actually see it coming out of the gun, right? Can you see the water? Okay? And what we're trying to do, the first thing we look at, I don't have any air on so that I can check the needle and the tip to make sure it's spraying straight. As I continue to pull that trigger, then it's going to start to feed the Reflectit materials to the gun. So all I'm right now is just getting the water out. Once I actually convert over to the Reflectit, which it just did,
7.5.
then virtually you just want to spray out with that, holding that gun perfectly level. You want to come out about 7.5 inches, and so it's real close right there, okay? And you want it 7.5 inches. If you want to look at the gauge as a reference point, then you can look at it. Then once you get it to where it's 7.5 inches, then just turn that nut in, And for that material, it'll be the right amount of material flow. Got a little something in the tip. It's got something in the tip. Go ahead and turn it up. Is that air on? No, the other one. Turn it on up just a little bit. Down a little bit now, Al. Okay. So that's how you control that. Then you look at the gauge. And for that particular gauge, it's X. That's all it is a reference tool. So when you look at the product data sheet and it says that the fluid flow should be on 12 pounds, it's going to be on 12 pounds if it's 7.5 inches. But it's not uncommon for those gauges not to read accurately. Then turn the right valve, which is your air disbursement, up to 40. And then I'll show you how to adjust that. Okay, I'm going to get that other piece of cardboard set over here. This one's covered, so we need just grab that one behind you. What I try to do is for whatever color that we're using, use something so that you can see the spray pattern. And just pull the trigger. Wait a minute, I don't even see it. There's material on there. It's that fine. Okay? So what I'm trying to do is when I look at that spray pattern, I'll get real close so that you can see it. From 16 inches away from that wall surface, I want all the atomization, in other words, the particle sizes, to be identical. So just walk over there so that they can see that. Just by happenstance, 40 is really close. And then I'm going to adjust it up and down a little bit to show you. Can you see how well it's atomized on the right-hand side of what he's showing you? That's what you're shooting for. Now, the other thing that you do, this is your, if you're wanting to spray like a little AirS or a little joint or something, this is your air valve where you can cut that down without changing anything else. Always leave that wide open. This is the needle for the fluid flow. Never touch it. Leave it alone as the factory setting. The one on the top, let's bring that back over for a second. What it does is adjust from a circle to an oblong. So when I start messing with the top, now I'm looking for a 16-inch oblong. When I go just the exact opposite, for the top knob, now I'm around. Our goal, once I get the atomization right, is to adjust this when I'm 16 inches off the wall, that I've got an oblong spray pattern that's 16 inches in height. So all we need to do is leave this open, leave this alone, and adjust this just for your spray pattern. Okay? That's it. Now, what you have to recognize, so we've got it pretty much where we want it, is that the other important part of this particular spray equipment, unlike an airless, is that this basically, this cap and that fluid cap atomizes the material 5 times before it leaves the gun. There in the center is your fluid. On either side of the fluid, there's 2 air tips that do this on either side. There's one in this ear, there's one in this ear, and then also when you take a look at the fluid cap, to swirl it around 360 degrees, there's one here, all the way around, and a second all the way around. It atomizes the material 5 times to get it that thin. And so the important part of it is when you went through the process, every time that you start every day, you do the same process. If you're getting larger particles, or if it's not 16-inch oblong, then one of the tips are plugged. It never gets paint on the inside of this. But if it's not spraying correctly, or a half moon, then something in the spray cap is plugged up. You can set this to where the ears are like this, or you can do it to where it's like this. That's what I typically do. And then I just change the position of the gun. So when you're spraying, recognize your heavy, light, and light. So when you start spraying, if this is the panel I'm going to spray, you start up here. You go past. Now, here's the point. Remember earlier when I said, when we were spraying Ameristone and Stone Mist, we're not painting the wall. All we're doing is applying the texture. Reflectit is identically the same. If you walk up here when I'm spraying, I'm not trying to get it on you, you will actually see that you can see the pearlescence flying through the air. All I'm doing is putting pearlescence on. This isn't about painting the wall where I come up and do that. You see what I sprayed so far? Do you see that? You don't. You stay at all times 16 inches back, and you do a crosshatch. So as I go through, just nice and steady, just relax. Always keeping the gun perpendicular to the surface of the wall. I'm not doing this or this. See the overspray? When I do that, always keep the gun perpendicular. Complete the first step, and it takes 2 coats. You have to do 1 crosshatch, and so this is the second half of the first spray coat. Well, wait a minute. Can you see the coating over here on the Terraneo? Wait a minute. Well, I can read. There's 2 crosshatch coats. If I make the mistake and try to paint it just like I did here, it's always there. It's thin coats. If you've got it atomized, you've got it dialed in, you've got to do 2 crosshatch coats. That's the secret. Okay? But we're only as good as the surface prep. So Al did a heck of a nice job of getting this nice and smooth. And if you don't have it nice and smooth, you don't put primer on. You don't put the Reflectit on. And that's how it works. Okay? There's a lot of steps to it. But trust the resources are here to make sure everything goes well. You can't deviate with this. It's like ornamental plaster. There's certain steps that you have to follow. Once you get that dialed in, you're golden. You try to start on your own and not understand the steps, there's going to be all kinds of problems. Okay? Any questions about the Reflectit? Really neat product. So I'll just go ahead and spray the second coat. Surprised somebody didn't ask. What's the coverage for this per pail? 900 square feet. See how thin that is? When I open it up, you'll say, well, we didn't hardly use any material, and that's correct. It's so finely atomized. Okay, great question. Remember when I talked about limestone? Do you ever do a huge wall that has limestone that's 30 foot tall? With Reflectit, the maximum panel size is 5 by 5 or 25 square feet. So that means a panel that's 5 foot wide, 5 foot tall, or a panel that's 3 foot by 7 foot. Okay? It can't be a panel that's 7 foot tall. You can't reach it because you'll have an overlap. So that means it's got to be broken up just like a metal panel with rustification joints. And it cannot exceed either 5 foot by 5 foot or basically a dimension, or in other words, a square foot area of 25 square feet, with the tallest vertical dimension being 5 feet? Okay, great question. Yes?
How much was more than the regulations?
Say again, please.
How much more per square foot?
Great question. Now, here's the right answer. And the question was, how much per square feet? There is no exact answer until I have the following 4 items. I need a rendering, I need a floor plan, I need wall sections, and details. Okay? And here's why. Well, is it union? Is it non-union? Is it 6 stories? Is it 1 story?
1 story.
Okay? The point would be, if you're probably in that range in other markets, probably somewhere between $30 and $35 a square foot. Okay, now if we're talking about union, 6 stories up, okay, that's why I'm saying, remember when I talked about the rendering, elevations, wall sections, floor plan? Why floor plan? We've got a project in Pittsburgh. They've specified all metal panels and brick. We talked to the design professional, and they came back when the project's almost completed and wanted to switch the main entrance to Reflectit. Ryan, why? He said, well, I just need a budget number. Ryan, there's 4 items that you owe me before we even discuss that. He sent them through. Guess what the first thing I saw on the floor plan? Double radius. The reason why he called us, the metal panel manufacturer looked at the elevations, did not look at the floor plan. They did not recognize it was a radius. And so, to answer the question, I knew one contractor that has the experience to do it. I said, if you're willing to work with them, great. If not, we're not interested. We're not going to be involved. Only one. Not because I'm trying to tell where the work. What we did, guys, think in terms of this being a perfect radius. And they're going to frame it with metal studs. What about the flat areas in between? You know what we did? We framed it like this, like a stop sign. And then cut all the foam after they field dimensions. And guess what? It turned out beautiful. This type of product is negotiated work. You have to decide in your own mind, if I want to do a level 10 product, and I can basically do that and make the commitment to learn the steps. There are several firms that are doing it. But then we have some that'll bid a project, never have done it before, ask the question, and then they come back and then they're struggling all the way through. All I'm saying is it's a great product. You can see the material works very well. We've got everything defined. But you've got to make the commitment for your guys to learn the steps. And if not, then this isn't the right product for you. If it is, it's negotiated work. Yes?
What's the warranty on this product?
The warranty on any of these finishes is determined by the system that goes up. Now, when we talk about that, standard warranty is typically 10 years, and that's industry-wide. If you use Trimco sealants, as Al mentioned in his presentation, we can bump that up 2 years, and the warranty includes the sealants. If Trimco spec 1, 3, or 4 sealant is utilized, that's 1. If we're doing a project, commercial, light commercial, we'll actually warrant the building forever if the building owner will come in at the end of the warranty, have a third-party firm off of a list, do an inspection, perform any maintenance, we'll reissue the warranty for another 10 years. At the end of 20 years, same program exists. We're the only manufacturer that offers any kind of warranty that's similar to that, regardless of cladding. That's a huge value. It really is. But ultimately, you're motivating the owner to maintain the building. Yes? No, it's regardless of where it's at, the warranty is identically the same. Our products are basically engineered that they are flexible enough to work in the coldest environments as well as the warmest environments as it relates to Arizona. That same warranty offering would exist in Phoenix as it would in Long Island. Okay? No limitation to that whatsoever. All right? So great question. But recognize as it relates to the Reflectit, question comes up, what about color fastness? Century has made a huge investment in utilizing a pigmentation called stratotone. That pigmentation gets you a much more color fast offering versus the standard pigments that are used by all the other competitors in the industry. So Bob actually works within that program for us, In most cases, let's say if you utilize Stratotone pigments, you can get a warranty like on Best Buy Blue, currently 5-7 years, 6 years, okay? That color won't fade. Standard pigments that all the competitors use, they'll fade within 9 months. So, again, our goal is not only to support you, but to support the end user with the best available technology in the market. And so trust, just like Reflectit, guess what the pigmentation is for Reflectit? It's Stratotone as the base pigmentation. Okay? What other questions on the Reflectit? Go ahead. Can it be done in black? We've got a color that's, yes, we've done black, we've done white. I think I showed some of you some of the white projects that we've done. Yes, sure can. The darker colors are going to show more imperfections as it relates to your surface prep. The one takeaway is your surface prep has to be first class. And so trust, the firms that are having success, they've made the commitment. Was the first project perfect? By no means it was perfect. But getting everyone to understand that base coat is the secret, then moving forward, everything else works out really well. Al's kind of jumped ahead a couple steps and already put the material the fresh material back in the pail. So now what we're actually doing is we're going to repressurize and actually get rid of the material and clean the gun. So this is just as important. So even though we're going to spray, which is a much quicker way to deliver the material to the wall, if you go 330, then you better at 2:45, you better be stopping and cleaning everything out. Because you've got a huge investment in this equipment, and if you leave it as is, once you screw it up, then it just screws everything up. So 2:45, you start cleaning it out, you repressurize it. At that point, turn the air side of the equation completely off. Leave the fluid on, but all we're actually doing is we don't need to spray water everywhere. You can run the risk of trying to pump some of this material back in the pail. I don't like to run that risk where I'm going to ruin a whole pail. So I just basically spray in, increase this one a little bit. And all I'm doing is just running water through. Okay? So I'm already switched over to water right there. Okay? And run that water till it's nice and clean. Then I can still see with my clear hose, I can still see that some of the material sticking on the side of the hose on the inside. Then I'll take it out and I'll run flush water through the supply hose both directions until the hose is completely cleaned out. There is something in that tip.